What did I take away after rewatching the BYU game? Well, I kind of came away in the camp that BYU has very good things happening for it. Obviously, you create your own luck in many respects when it comes to college football. I think case in point, you look to the interceptions and the fumble that Jack Kelly caused. Those 3 turnovers, BYU cashed into the tune of 21 points. I say it often on this podcast. I'm not the only one who says it, but good teams make you pay for your mistakes in college football. When you get a turnover, you want to turn that into 7 points. You want to just make it hurt for the opposing team. And that's exactly what BYU did Saturday night. Something that I loved, I think is a sustainable thing from those 3 turnovers for BYU is, remember, the punch out or the strip from Jack Kelly proves once again that he is just an absolutely insanely talented football player. I'm not sure what the ceiling is for Jack Kelly, but when he gets that ball out and all of a sudden Tommy Prassis is, I say, Tommy on the spot, scoops it up and rumbles in from 20 whatever yards out for a touchdown, that flipped this game on its head. That's when the pressure mounted for Avery Johnson. And I saw, rewatching this game, that Jay Hill said, all right, game on, everybody. Let's do this thing. Moments after that scoop and score for the touchdown, remember, it was a zone blitz that BYU ran that Avery Johnson ended up throwing that interception to Tyler Batty. Incredible play. By the way, Tyler Batty, props to you for being able to do that. Showed off your athleticism as a big man, 6'5", 280, whatever you weigh, to go down low and scoop that pass and get your hands underneath and make sure it did not touch the ground. Incredible effort in that. But as I rewatch this game, and some of you may have seen it yourself, as Avery Johnson comes off the field and he's pulling off his helmet, there's a coach that asks him essentially, hey, what happened out there? I can't be 100% certain because my lip reading skills are not elite, but I'm fairly certain that he said, I didn't see him. What that means is he didn't see Tyler Batty drop back from his defensive end position in a zone blitz concept right into that throwing lane that he ended up throwing it right to him. That screams to me that Jay Hill had Avery Johnson in the Kansas State offense exactly where he wanted. And he ratcheted up the pressure, said, all right, we're bringing in a corner off the other side to pressure Avery Johnson into throwing this pass early. And Tyler Batty sat right in that hole in the zone and picked it off. Incredible play. Then after halftime, Kansas State gets it to halftime. Then BYU comes back out. What happens then? Well, Jay Hill says, all right, I got this kid by the toes, if you want to use that expression. He's just essentially, I've got this kid right where I want him. What does he do next? He starts to bring more pressure from BYU, but he also uses zone concepts beyond that. The Harrison Taggart interception was a case of what I believe is what they use the term seeing ghosts. When a quarterback is under pressure and all of a sudden they're starting to feel pressure, whether real or imagined, in the case of that play, remember, Tyler Batty nearly had a sack on that play, but all of a sudden Avery Johnson steps up, feels the pressure, and throws an incredibly ill-advised pass in the middle of the field that Harrison Taggart reaches up and picks off. If Harrison Taggart doesn't get it, well, guess who's going to get it? Crew Wakely. Crew Wakely undercut that route, and the ball was not thrown well at all. Jay Hill saw the writing on the wall. In that circumstance, it was about, it ended up being 3 or 4 minutes of game time, and said, all right, we got this kid right where we want him. Let's turn up the pressure and see how he responds. And frankly, Avery Johnson crumbled in that moment. Can he respond and get better from it? Yes, he will learn from that moment. His coaches, I'm sure, speaking to Avery Johnson in film review, will point out exactly what Jay Hill and the BYU defense did to him, and he'll improve from that. But it paid off in a big way for BYU. And that's one thing I wanted to point out, is that BYU can build on that. When you can see, or I guess in this case, it'd be more of a feel thing for Jay Hill because he's a veteran coach who has run these schemes and seen these schemes time and time again. When he sees moments like that, that is why Jay Hill is paid as handsomely as he is. And I hope that BYU continues to pay him more handsomely to keep him on BYU's sideline. He is an absolutely insanely talented play caller and defensive coordinator. I can't say enough good things about what he did in that circumstance. Other things I took away from this game. I really liked what I saw from BYU's offensive line. Are they elite yet? No. And I think Connor Pay will come on the podcast this week, and he will admit to as much as that, because he doesn't believe that they're playing at an elite level. But if you take away the sack yardage for Jake, and I want to talk about the sack yardage in a moment, BYU ran for their best overall output in terms of their overall running game on the season. They're making steps bit by bit by bit, and they're winning football games as a result. I really like the progression I'm seeing. Does it need to still go up? Absolutely. I don't think BYU can hope for much more than 8-4, 9-3 if they can't sustain drives longer than they are capable of sustaining them right now. A couple of you pointed it out to me in postcast saying, Jake, I'm not a believer in this offense. They haven't been able to sustain drives. I wanted to quibble with that, but rewatching it, I can admit I'm wrong in that circumstance. BYU does need to be able to sustain drives better. And you look at the drives BYU had to mount in the game against Kansas State. There weren't very many of them because they got I think their starting average field position was the plus 44. Speaking of the opponent 44-yard line, it might have been there 40. It was good field position regardless because short fields will do that for you. But when BYU had drives they started to put together, remember their second and third ones in the first and second quarter, BYU had a good thing going. Sacks, got him behind the chains, and BYU did not respond well. Third down percentage continues to be a sore point for this BYU offense. They have got to find a way to stay ahead of the chains and maintain that momentum they get. There's still decision-making at times from Jake Retzlaff. I think that sack he took, remember, they were going from north to south. There's this third drive. He takes that sack down in the red zone. That's a play that you throw out of the back of the end zone in the general direction of a receiver and don't take that sack yardage. Brock Osweiler, who's a quarterback, pointed that very thing out on the broadcast. You eat that yardage. BYU's offense right now is not capable of overcoming getting behind the chains. And I'd like to see them get to that point, but until it happens, they've got to avoid self-inflicted wounds. Outside of that, I think the decision-making from Jake Retzlaff was absolutely brilliant in this game. We are seeing him, along with the rest of the BYU offense, take steps in a positive direction right now for BYU. 0 turnovers from him. Really no ill-advised throws that I believe were ill-advised in that game against Kansas State. We're seeing a quarterback coming of age. I said it Saturday night. I'll reiterate it right now. He has played 8 career games as BYU starting quarterback. Remember, Jaron Hall, Zach Wilson, John Beck. You can go back through the history books of BYU quarterbacks. 8 games into their career, I don't think that they were elite in many respects in that circumstance or those circumstances that they found themselves in. I can remember Zach Wilson being criticized. I can remember Jaron Hall being criticized early on as BYU starting quarterback. I think Jake Retzlaff is going to end up being a very, very capable quarterback for BYU. I think he's just getting judged a little more harshly because the level of competition that he is facing is quite literally better than any other quarterback in BYU football history. You can argue with me all you want on it, but remember, BYU wasn't a Power 4 member, and we talked as a fan base and in the media about how BYU wanted to prove themselves against the best of the best. They're doing it now, and we're seeing Jake Retzlaff grow up right before our very eyes, to use that term, as he continues to progress along the path. And I think he's going to become a very good quarterback. Could that be curbed at some point? Yes, it could. Things could happen. He could go back to being an awful decision maker like we saw at points against SMU and going back to last season. But I really do think we're seeing a quarterback who is doing a very, very good job of being cognizant of not making ill-advised mistakes out there. I think he's learning and he's getting better and better as we go along. And I think the offense as a whole is getting better as we go along. Other thing on the offense that I think is going to help. Sione Moa really emerged. And I'm not saying anything that's revelatory here. But one thing that was pointed out to me that I missed, I had completely forgotten about this. Do you guys know where his hometown is listed as on BYU's website? No, it's not Timpview High School. He was a former 5A MVP in the state of Utah at Timpview High School, ran for 2,200 yards and a gazillion touchdowns as a Timpview Thunderbird. He grew up in the Inland Empire down in Southern California. You know, one of the great BYU running backs of late have come out of the Inland Empire? Oh, some guy named Jamal Williams and another guy named Tyler Algier. I don't know what BYU's doing down in what they like to call the IE in down in Southern California, but they are routinely finding guys who are capable running backs out of that area. Sione Moa appears to be the next guy. And LJ Martin, I hope he gets back soon. I said it before, I'll say it again. I don't expect to see him until after the bye weeks when BYU takes on Arizona on October 12th. That's when I expect to see him back in action for BYU if all goes well. But in the meantime, Sione Moa is 5'10", 210 pounds, and he runs angry. That touchdown run, the final touchdown run of the night that he had, it was a 3rd and 8, and he rumbles through. It felt like every Kansas State defender's attempt to tackle him. He runs with power. He runs with balance. I'm telling you, the comparisons between him and those other Inland Empire running backs, Jamal Williams, Tyler Algier, they're not unfounded. Now, he is early on in his career, and he's obviously going to have to progress and get better. But I really, really liked what I saw from him. And it doesn't take anything away from what we saw from Pokai Haunga either. Pokai Haunga is more in the mold, I think, of a Reno Mahe. You have a thunder and lightning combo here. Remember, when Reno, a.k.a. Junior Mahe, was at BYU, he was more of that scat back, change of pace guy, whereas you had other running backs who were the bigger body, and that's what a guy like Sione Moa is. I think the trio of LJ Martin, Pokai Haunga, and Sione Moa could form the trio that BYU can build their offensive running game around for a good 2 to 3 years here if all goes according to plan. Now, you need offensive line play in front of that, and I thought the BYU offensive line performed well. Bruce Mitchell didn't do anything that I thought was going to take away his opportunity to continue to start for BYU. I do wonder once Sonny Makassini and or Austin Leusa are healthy, if they just get to put themselves right back into the lineup there, or if they have to earn it back. But Bruce Mitchell, a converted defensive lineman, I thought was very, very good. So that's just some of the stuff I took away from this game. Harrison Taggart was absolutely awesome at middle linebacker. Remember all the conversation about Siale Acera should be the middle linebacker, maybe Ace Kafusi should be the guy. Harrison Taggart said, yeah, no. That it's my job. And a career high 10 tackles, had that interception. He was absolutely marvelous. I mentioned Jack Kelly. I just don't know what level he can continue to rise to, but he continues to show every single game. There's more to see from him. I'm absolutely astounded at what we're seeing from this BYU team. Is it sustainable? I don't think the offense can afford to have 241 total yards and expect to win a bunch of ball games. They need to get back to running the football and playing complementary football in the offense. But once again, they took advantage of what was given to them in that game. It was a crazy set of circumstances, but good teams will make you pay for those mistakes. And this is what BYU did. Can we see against Baylor this week when maybe they're not going to have those same type of turnovers? You're not going to have the home crowd behind you. Can you go out there and sustain those long, grinding drives? Can you put together a 10-play drive that ends with a touchdown and it's just demoralizing for the Baylor Bears defense? That's, I think, the next step of progression for this BYU offense. But so far, so good. They're 4-0. I think that's enough for me to feel good about BYU.